Hey guys, today on Courtney Sweets I'm showing you how to make chicken broth and chicken stock. So here's that stock. It's jelly, whereas this is so liquidy. It's like jello. See, it's not a clear liquid. It's not liquidy. In a large stock pot, we're going to add a raw whole chicken. You could also use cut up pieces, but I just like using a one whole chicken. We go for 5 to 6 pounds. We're using a quartered large onion. We're using 2 carrots, about 3 stalks of celery. They're kind of small and they have the rib pieces in the middle. And then we're also using parsley, dill, and a tomato. And then I like to add some salt. You can also leave that out and season as needed. I'm using kosher salt, some black pepper, and then if you have fresh thyme, you could use that, but I have dried thyme, so I'm using some dried thyme. Now we want to cover this with water, and then I'm covering it just so the chicken's covered about 2 to 3 inches. The broth is going to evaporate, and speaking of evaporating, we want to make sure we're covering our stock pot, but we don't want to cover it completely because we do want some air to escape. So I do like this, a little gap, so this way when it's cooking a little bit, it does escape. Now I cooked this for about an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on the size of my chicken. And then once the chicken is done, I actually like to shred all of that meat, and then I can save that meat and we have our beautiful broth for other uses. Now what I do is I wash my hands and I put on a pair of gloves. I like to use gloves because the chicken is super hot, and then I'll just take that meat apart from the bones and I'll remove all of the skin. Now this meat is perfect for any of your recipes. You can make it, into a chicken salad. You could, mash it up with some mayo and some vegetables and make a delicious chicken salad. But it is perfect for whatever you need to use it for, and then you could just discard those bones. And then you have about 4 to 5 cups of cooked chicken after. Now, like grandma would say, remove any schmutz from the top of your stock pot, and then you're gonna drain all of those vegetables and herbs and any chicken pieces that may be left behind before you put your soup broth away. So as you can see, I have quite a bit, and then I'm just gonna take a ladle and really get all of the juice out of those ingredients, so this way we're not losing any of that broth. And before refrigerating or freezing, we do let our soup cool down for 30 minutes. And then what I like to do is I like to actually freeze it into 1 cup portions. These super cubes are pretty amazing. And I just put it right into there, and then I just measure it out. And then whenever I need 1 cup of broth for a recipe, I could just pop out a cube, or what I like to do is actually freeze them after this again. So I just use this just to measure them out, and it's perfect. It's always ready when I need it. So now when I freeze them, I don't put the lid on all the way because I find that it gets really hard to take off once it's frozen. So I kind of leave it almost a little bit off, and you just need to be careful if your fridge door opens when you open your freezer. Once it's frozen, it's fine. And then any leftover stock I will put into the fridge so I have it throughout the week, and I'll save it for 3 to 4 days. I'll use this for any sauces, soups, or whatever I need it for. And then here's our soup frozen. This was from, 2 weeks ago, and it has a little bit of frost on top, and that's fine. I had it sitting out while I was filming, but usually it's not like that. What I do is I put it into a stasher bag, and then I have those 1 cup cubes ready for whenever I need it. Now we're going to show you how to make chicken stock, also known as bone broth. So I have a chicken that I roasted last night, and I'm just going to remove all of the meat from that. As you can see, there's also some fat on the top there. I actually cook it with a cup of water so I can get started on that bone broth, and it gives it more flavor, and I can also get rid of a lot of the fat from the chicken. So I'm just basically removing all the meat. Now that I have all of the meat off the bones, I just put that right into my stock pot, and I also scrape all of that flavor from the bottom of the pan, because remember I put in a cup of liquid, maybe even 2 cups sometimes, and that has a ton of flavor, and you can see it gets gelatinous already. Now we're gonna add in even more bones. I actually make drumsticks quite often, or chicken on the bone, and then I take those bones off before we eat the meat and put them right into a freezer bag and place them in the freezer so I can make stocks like this. So this bone broth is filled with bones. I don't have to prep a whole bunch of bones at one time. I have it in the freezer ready to go. Aromatics, I'm adding in onion, parsley, dill. You can use whatever herbs you want or any veggies you want. I'm also adding in carrots, and then I'm gonna fill this pot up with the desired amount of water. If you wanted a richer and thicker gelatinous stock, you could also add in less, but I want more, so I'm adding as much as I want. I'm also adding in salt, pepper, and thyme, just like I did with the chicken broth. So now you're gonna let this cook on a low fire for 24 hours, checking it occasionally because you don't want it to boil over. We're gonna cook it covered. You could also do it in the slow cooker if you feel more comfortable. Then once you drain it, you're gonna wanna discard all of the chicken, and then I actually like to put it in the refrigerator, and then I let it cool and completely remove all that fat before freezing and storing. So now I have this one halfway filled, and you could just see it's like nice and jelly, and then this one's just pure liquid. It is nice and clear, and it's a lighter color. So what's the difference between chicken broth and chicken stock? To me, a chicken broth is something that I cook really quickly. I'm not using bones that I roasted in the oven. I'm not using a ton of bones in general. I'm using fresh chicken, fresh vegetables, and I can have this about an hour and a half to 2 hours tops done. Whereas with a chicken stock or bone broth, you're gonna be using a lot of bones. I like to roast my bones, and then I will put those bones into the freezer until I have a ton of bones, and then I'll put it into a stock pot and let it cook for 24 hours. You could do the minimum of 12 hours, but for the most gelatinous bone broth, chicken stock, you're gonna wanna let it go low and slow. And you'll see how dark it is compared to the actual chicken broth. I use both of these recipes all the time. Now, what do I use most of the time in the kitchen? I usually use chicken broth. I make it a ton, and I always put it into super cubes into the freezer, so I could just pop a cup or two into any dish that I need it for. So whether you want a ton of flavor, which you can enjoy this just by drinking it warm, or you're using it for recipes, or you wanna make a soup, both are great. But you're gonna get a lot more nutrients with this, but it's just a little bit more labor intensive. So now you can see a huge difference between the chicken broth and the chicken stock. This chicken stock is much darker, whereas the chicken broth is much lighter. This is because we used roasted bones instead of using raw chicken. Now they both have the same ingredients when it comes to vegetables and herbs, and they also use water as the base, but we are changing the way we use the chicken. So for the broth, I use raw chicken. For the bone stock with bone broth, chicken stock, I use roasted bones. You can make some chicken legs, you can make a whole roasted chicken, and then take all the meat off of those things and put those bones into a zipper bag and put them in the freezer, and then once you're ready and have a ton of bones, you make your broth. Look at that. It's so dark and beautiful. But this is just as good. I use this for tons of recipes. Anything that calls for broth, I could use chicken broth. And if you don't want to use chicken, you could do the same thing with vegetables. We hope you guys enjoy this recipe. See you soon.